What was behind the terror attacks in New Orleans and in Las Vegas? Should we trust the FBI to investigate? Today is January 2nd, 2025, and we are less than 3 weeks from the January 20th inauguration of President-elect Donald Trump. The world is changing. The world is rejecting the policy of perpetual war and genocide. And you see it in elections and governments collapsing in Europe. In Croatia, the new president, Zoran Milanovic, was known for opposing continuing to arm Ukraine for a war against Russia. You have the statements of President Orban of Hungary. We have the Prime Minister Fico of Slovakia, and you have elections coming up in Germany on January 23rd, where there's a huge freak out because Elon Musk had a major editorial in a newspaper there saying that the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland party, may be the only hope. Why? Because they oppose sending long-range missiles, as we are now doing, to Ukraine to escalate a war with Russia. They recognize that if Russia responds, Germany, not the US, is going to be the target. Here, it certainly appears as if the outgoing Biden administration is doing everything it can to force the hand of the incoming President Trump. And Secretary of State Blinken said this at a Council on Foreign Relations interview December 20th. He didn't put it that way, of course. He said, "We want Trump to be in the strongest possible position to deal with Russia." In other words, Biden is now sending Ukraine another $2 billion worth of weapons the last week of the year to try and provoke Russia into doing something which could be used then to demand there must be a response to get the Americans to change their opinion, which is overwhelmingly against funding this war, and making it more difficult for President Trump to negotiate an end to it. Starting at 8 a.m. yesterday, January 1st, Ukraine, under orders from the US and UK, I'm sure, canceled the transshipment of Russian liquid natural gas through Ukraine to Europe. Last year, Ukraine transshipped, the pipeline through Ukraine delivered over 15 billion cubic meters of LNG to the European Union, 4.5% of their total consumption. Not surprisingly, this is driving up energy prices, may cause shortages if they have harsh weather. Some geniuses in Germany are saying, well, we should just shut down industry. Like that's going to really work. Personally, I think someone finally ought to tell the truth about what happened to the Nord Stream pipelines. Another point of vulnerability to ensnare Trump in an endless or potentially thermonuclear war is if Israel is allowed to attack Iran to destroy Iran's alleged nuclear or nuclear research enrichment facilities, etc., which is another such potential danger and conflict. Now, on December 27th in Gaza, the last hospital in northern Gaza, the Kamal Adwan Hospital, was destroyed by the Israeli forces. The director of the hospital, Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, whose son had just been killed by the Israelis, was kidnapped, abducted, probably is being held and tortured at a notorious, very brutal prison. A group called Doctors Against Genocide and the family members of Dr. Abu Safia are demanding pressure to get his release and to stop the targeting of hospitals. And for those of you not familiar with Dr. Mark Perlmutter, he is a Jewish surgeon who went to Gaza and who himself has been in 40 different disaster, hurricane, earthquake, war zones to try and help children. And he went there and said that he actually thought that Israel was acting in self-defense after the terror attack of 2023. But when he went there, he saw with his own eyes that this is an absolute policy of genocide, with snipers shooting children in the chest and in the head, the withholding of food, water, medicine. And if you're not aware, over 1,000 doctors and healthcare workers have been killed now. They're being targeted just as journalists are. I have to say, I think the truth is going to come out. You know, it's going to come out because now even CNN is calling on people to mobilize to get Dr. Abu Safia released, but that is not enough. This has to stop. We are going to be judged over what we did not do to stop this genocide. So please visit the Doctors Against Genocide website. They're going to be in Congress on January 8th. Now, meanwhile, back to the United States. The New Orleans terror attack death toll has risen to 15. The driver of the vehicle, which purportedly had an ISIS flag on the back as it drove through the New Year's Eve crowd, killing and injuring all of these people, was a 42-year-old Shamsuddin Jabbar who had been in the military for 10 years, divorced twice, and lived in a trailer park with goats and chickens in his yard. That's what we're told. Now we're being told there are 3 other suspects who were observed planting bombs at various locations. All of this from the FBI. Hours later, a Tesla cyber electric pickup truck, you know, those science fiction looking vehicles, exploded and burned in front of the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada. Clearly Tesla, Elon Musk, Trump Hotel, some kind of targeting. The driver died and 7 bystanders were injured. Obviously, these are horrific attacks, and our condolences go to the families and friends and everyone affected by this needless carnage and suffering, which should not be happening. But I don't claim to have inside information on what is behind either of these attacks. I don't know whether they're related to each other or not. But this past year, I watched a documentary called The Newburgh Sting, which tells the story about the Newburgh Four, who were supposed Islamic terrorists who were planning to blow up a synagogue, and they ended up spending several years in prison innocently. Turns out they were all recruited by an FBI informant. Remember the Governor Whitmer kidnapping organized by the FBI? In this case, the FBI informant who had a criminal background, maybe he was trying to get a deal or something, offered each of these people $250,000 to join in a terror plot. And because of their various desperate circumstances, they agreed to, even though you have on the FBI tapes them saying in some cases, look, I really don't want to kill anybody. And a movie was produced called The Newburgh Sting, which I recommend watching. So I have to say, this sounds too familiar. Muslim extremists, the FBI. What is the actual story going on here? Convenient that the driver is now dead, as is Thomas Crooks, the alleged lone assassin who attempted to murder President Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13th. We're not hearing too much about that anymore, are we? So what's the purpose of these things? To change the way people think, to manipulate the population. I think we have to ask, are these attacks going to be used to bolster the arguments of people like the 100-year-old former FBI director, Bill Weld, that Kash Patel and Tulsi Gabbard are simply not qualified? We have a serious crisis. They're not qualified to serve as FBI director and director of national intelligence. Better to have people who will lie to us, isn't it? And remember that Bill Webster, let me make sure that's corrected, not Weld, Bill Webster, did just write a letter telling members of the US Senate that their security depends on keeping these 2 Trump nominees from being confirmed. Maybe it has nothing to do with that. But sadly, since the truth has still not been told about the assassinations of President Kennedy, Malcolm X, who was born 100 years ago this year, Martin Luther King, and Robert Kennedy, And we seem to be lurching from one war to the next, each more deadly than the last, all of which are motivated by demonstrable lies. There's good reason that Americans don't trust the 17 or 18, but who's counting, so-called intelligence agencies. It's the intention of the LaRouche organization that the year 2025 is going to be different. Our government needs to be purged of people who bring harm to others for their own personal gain. So Harley wanted me to tell you he will be answering your questions tomorrow morning, tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. You can email him at harleysch@gmail.com, harleysch@gmail.com. And you can tune in tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern Time for the LaRouche Fireside Chat, Friday at 11 a.m. for the International Peace Coalition, and Saturday at 2 o'clock, Harley, myself, and Dennis Speed, and perhaps special guests will be together on the Manhattan Project show, where we're going to delve into this. Who is this treason faction in the United States? What are we learning from files now declassified after Jimmy Carter has passed away about Zbigniew Brzezinski, Henry Kissinger, and others who used war and manipulated wars in order to carry out their own political agendas? So join us Saturday at 2 o'clock, and let's make this new year a great new year where the United States finally defeats the British Empire.